Now, carrying on with this series of videos we're doing on teaching, these are the ideas and concepts that helped me when I was learning to teach, so I'm hoping they're going to be helpful for you as well. And one of the things I found useful was looking at a kind of overview of the whole process. So you could call this the teaching process. Now, my own field, as you probably know, is nursing, so we have something called the nursing process, and we assess, plan, implement and evaluate. But this is the same for anything. This is a systematic problem-solving approach. We assess the needs, we plan what we're going to do about it, we do something, and then we evaluate to see if it's effective. Now, in terms of teaching, this means that we can be purposeful. Good teaching should be purposive. This is not opportunistic, this is planned teaching. So it's prepared, and we learn the material as teachers. We learn the content. And we work out a mode of delivery, the process, how we're going to deliver this material. And if we've got a group of students, that's good, because in theory they're all exposed to the same thing. There's parity of exposure. And if this is for one individual assessment or one individual lesson, then that's going to be part of a whole. So we can systematically cover a topic in the context of the whole course. And this can be part of an ongoing curriculum, and a spiral curriculum, for example, where we revisit things in more detail. So this is good for teaching. For example, in the example of nursing, it's good for teaching students and peers, other healthcare professionals. But also we need to teach patients. We want to promote their recovery and prevent relapses. And we also want to teach the wider public health promotion and health education. And whatever field you're in, I'm sure you can think of a range of people that you're going to be potentially teaching, including teaching people that are professionals, your peers, and including people that are lay people, if you like, people that aren't involved in your particular profession or area of expertise. So assessment. Well, let's take into account the student's previous learning. The previous learning. What the student already knows. The most important thing in education is assessing what the student already knows and teaching them accordingly. So this will help us work out the learner needs, the needs of the learner. Because we have to be student focused, we have to focus on the student. And we also have to think about ourselves. What's the teacher experience? Am I sufficiently experienced? Am I sufficiently knowledgeable to teach this particular topic, whatever the title of this lesson is? But the main thing here in the assessment stage is to focus on the learner. What do the learners already know? How does this fit into what they already know? Because we have to be learner-centered, looking at this from the point of view of the learner, not from the point of view of the teacher. But we have to make sure that we're sufficiently experienced to be able to teach it effectively. Then we need to plan the lesson. So planning, obviously, we can look at aims and objectives. What is it we want to achieve? What are the learning outcomes? What do we need to communicate? And how are we going to communicate it? So there's quite a big how thing here. This is kind of the process we're going to go through as well as the product. And we might take into account things like the environment. What's the classroom like? What's the lab like we're going to be teaching in? How can we optimize that environment? Do we need to go in before the session and set it up in an appropriate way? All these little things actually make a big difference to the way that the session goes and how it's planned and later implemented. But also at this stage, I think it's worth thinking about, again, thinking about the students, thinking about the learner. And one of the things, because we're looking at this from the teacher point of view, is how am I going to form relationships with the students? Because the key thing in teaching very often is how we as the teacher, how we are relating to the students. Teaching is a very interpersonal activity, and how the students are relating to us. So just to give a simple example, when you're learning to teach, it's very easy to be focusing on what you need to teach. And you walk in, and if you're well organised, you'll say, right, today we're going to cover the liver, and the aims and objectives are this, that and the other. That's wrong. What you need to do is go in to the students and say, well, good morning, everyone. Observe the normal politeness, the normal social interactions. This is one human being communicating with other human beings. Sometimes I've gone into a lesson thinking about the content and I start teaching and I think, oh, I forgot to say good morning to everyone. And at that stage I'll stop and say, oh, by the way, good morning, everyone. Form a relationship. Point out that you're going to be open. This relationship between the students and the teacher is key. And it needs to be planned. Some people are brilliant at it, they can just do it spontaneously. Others of us need to plan as we go along. So we're planning the nature of the relationship. Then we've got the implementation. Well, here we can think about learning styles. Or learning styles is a good way to put it. How are we going to communicate the material? And that'll give us a teaching method. So some people like to hear things so we can talk to them. Some people like to draw things so we can draw pictures. Verbal and visual ways of communicating. And this can inform our teaching method. So the way the students like to learn should inform our teaching method. So we can give a lecture, or we can have small group discussions, or role play, or project work, or talk and chalk, or talk and whiteboard, as it might be in more modern situations. Or we can have learning contracts, or experiential learning, or buzz groups, or directed study, or discussion, or debate, or brainstorming, or simulation, or question and answer. So think about the particular teaching methods that you might be employing that interact well with the learner's preferred style of learning. Always remember, another golden rule here is talk with people. Not at them. So this is not, it should not be a didactic discourse. Sit down, I'm going to dictate and you take notes. It shouldn't be like that. It should be a discussion, talking with people, not at them. Now this is easy, of course, if you have a small group, but if you have a larger group, it becomes more difficult. And that is more challenging, but you do need to interact with the group in some way. So you might nominate individuals, you might ask people to volunteer, you might ask people to put their hand up, or you might systematically go through the whole group as the lesson progresses. As long as you don't intimidate the students, that's fine. But you need to work out some way that you're going to interact with them, so you're talking with them. Talk with them. And this means that you are going to modify and adapt what you say as you go along, depending on this ongoing feedback that you get from the students. And at this stage, the implementation, we're thinking about two things. We're talking about product, and we're also talking about process. The process we go through. So the product is the end thing. That is the learning. That is the ability to manipulate data. It's what we are getting out of the lesson. It's kind of the takeaway product, if you like. But the process is also important because students can learn through the process. This is the process that we go through as we implement different learning methods to facilitate different learning styles. And then the last part of the process, as we see here, is the evaluation. So has learning occurred is the very simple question. Has it worked? Has learning occurred? If it hasn't, then you could argue that the whole thing's been a bit of a waste of time. Learning needs to occur. And this can be evaluated in a formative way. So formative learning is, or formative evaluation or assessment is ongoing. It is not marked, but then later on it can be summative. Summative means there's a formalised examination or a formalised process of assessment. But formative evaluation should be going on all the time. So has learning occurred? And of course, this evaluation stage has to lead back to the assessment stage for next time. So having gone through this process, how are we going to improve it for next time? Because even after I've been teaching for a very long time, you still modify lessons depending on the experience you've had in one particular session. So this is very much you moving on from being the subject specialist to being the communicator of the subject. Learning to think as a teacher, learning to work as a teacher. And if this helps you, fine. If not, don't worry about it. But I found it useful to think about the stages: assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation.